Hello, NAACP family. My name is Wisdom Cole, and I proudly serve as the National Director of the NAACP Youth and College Division. And welcome to the Race and Justice session on community violence, root causes, prevention, and intervention. We have an amazing group of panelists today who are going to be speaking about the root causes of community violence. Our first speaker is Angela Lang, Executive Director of BLOC. Our second speaker is Professor Michael Eric Dyson, University Distinguished Professor of African American Studies at Vanderbilt University. And last and certainly not least, Robin Williams, board member of the NAACP. When we see policies that unfairly target and penalize Black people in the criminal justice system, we must address these issues where they are, with laws and legislation, with elected and appointed leaders. When we talk about race and justice, we're talking about the ways that discrimination, policing, prosecution, and incarceration practices impact Black communities. Our criminal justice system is shaped by biased policing and unfair judicial precedents rooted in anti-Blackness and racial disparity. The emotional, mental, physical, and financial impact on our communities is tangible experience for millions of Black people in the US. The cost of an unjust system is at high. Black people are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites. 65% of Black adults have felt targeted because of their race. Similarly, approximately 35% of Latinos and Asian adults have felt targeted because of race. There's a lot that we're fighting here, but we're going to open up this conversation so we can start talking about some of the myths that are impacted when we think about community violence. Thank you all for being here. Would love to give some opening remarks, starting with Angela.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I think we're in this time where we're just surrounded by a lot of violence and violence in different forms. And there's been so many different conversations about what this looks like. And I'm glad to be able to be a part of it. And a little bit about me, I am the founder and executive director of a group called BLOC, Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, based in Milwaukee. We launched after the 2016 election, and really humbled to be turning 5 in November of this year. And one of the first things that we always ask, whether we're having a political conversation or even a not political conversation, our introductory question is, what does it look like for the Black community to thrive? And through that, we hear what people think about safety. And 9 times out of 10, we don't hear people say that they want more policing. People say that they want access to affordable housing. People say that safety is being able to have access to mental health resources, to be able to have a living wage job. And then we see how all of these things and all of these challenges can also be barriers in access to democracy as well. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that our office is located in the 53206 zip code. It is the most incarcerated zip code in the country. And through that, understanding that it is 95% African American, we see that there's a very intentional diluting of Black political power. Because if you take away enough people's ability to vote, and then don't tell them when their votes are, or their voting rights are restored after they're off probation or off papers, we see this really intentional way of using violence, of using the criminal justice system also as barriers for full participation in democracy as well. So really excited to dig into these nuanced and big discussions and really kind of put a name to what our communities are facing and experiencing. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Angela. Professor Dyson, opening remarks.
Yes, thank you. What an honor to be here. It certainly is a time of reflection about the pervasive violence we see in society. Sister Angela's already laid it out, the multifocal emphases that we can generate in a culture where we have the convergence of violences, multiple forms of violence, economic, spiritual, social violence, physical violence, geographical violence, even geological violence for that matter. And so, you know, where we live, where we're positioned, what we're vulnerable to, the prospects of our children being educated, and then living safely. And as was indicated, obviously the old canard, the tried and true, traumatizing shibboleth, or at least commonsensical assertion about Black on Black violence. And we are caught between two tendencies. On the one hand, we know that to reduce the complexity of what Black folk confront to Black on violence misses the fact that people kill where they live. People are violent where they exist. If you want integrated killing, have integrated communities. The point is, people don't take buses or trams or public transportation out to do carnage, because it's mostly a matter of, being fed up, being caught at the wrong moment, being caught in a traumatizing situation, domestically speaking, with someone you know. We know the outliers here, the guys, the white guys who were disaffected standing on rooftops or squatting there, picking people off, and other forms of violence, certainly bespeak the need for seriously considering what the roots of violence are and the out of control behavior of the obsession with the gun culture and the cult of the gun. You would think that the Second Amendment was really the second commandment, because there's a worship of the idol of the gun. And yet, on the one hand, we talk about Black on Black violence when we know it's neighbor to neighbor carnage. Mm-hmm. We saw this in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Poles, Jews, Italian, Irish, white ethnicities from Eastern and Western Europe filling the shtetl, the ghettos of our cities, and engaging in similar behavior. But there was an exception. The white leaders, the white intellectuals, the white caregivers said, we will not allow this to happen on our watch to these, our brothers and sisters, and made deliberate intervention to rescue those imperiled populations. So on the one hand, you got that. And on the other hand, you got people who say that it's not Black on Black, but who ignore the fact that Black people in communities are being terrorized by forms of domestic hurt and pain that are focused on Black bodies as well. So you don't have to be a right-wing conservative reactionary to be concerned about the fact that people of color, Black people in this case, are being victimized because of the exigent circumstances of economic inequality, social injustice, the downturn in the economy, the shift from manufacturing to service industries, the lack of jobs, the rise of technocracy, the steel collar over the blue collar, automated technology displacing live workers. When you look at all that stuff, there's a concentration of hurt, harm, and danger in these communities that even enlightened activists have to address, because Black people call the police more than anybody else. So we got to figure out why it is the case that is the situation. And we don't want a Jalen Walker. We don't want, when the police show up, they can't make a distinction between law-abiding citizens and those they've demonized out of a transcript of anti-Blackness that continues to inform them. So there's a lot to talk about, and I look forward to doing so.
Thank you so much, Professor Dyson. That definitely is a lot for us to dive into. Leader Williams, opening remarks.
Well, I would definitely say Professor Dyson and Angela, they laid it out very well. Before 2 years ago, I retired. I was an international vice president for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. And in my union, we represent workers from meatpacking, food processing, and in other industries around food. And we had a lot of workers that were re-entering into the job market. And so I'll say, part of this whole criminal justice society and infrastructure here is really talking about, the crime and who is committed by, right? And here in the metropolitan area I live, we have a lot of young people that are really doing petty theft, petty crimes, we have car break-ins and things like that. And older people, I want to have a candid conversation. Older people are very afraid. They're very afraid. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and during Marion Barry's times, we had summer jobs. If you wanted to do business in DC, you had to provide a summer job for our kids. We don't have those anymore. Now what we have in the District of Columbia is over-policing in Black communities. Professor Dyson said that you're going to do crime in the communities that you live in. So we do have white on white crime and we have Black on Black crime. It is no different. What is different in the Black community is the economics and the discrimination and the underserved areas in our community. And it's real. So we can't ignore it. We can't avoid it. We have guns on the street, and there are no policies to get rid of these guns that are on the street. Young people can get guns. Anyone can get guns at this time. And then there are more policies trying to push guns on US citizens than there are policies trying to get guns off the street. So, we have a lot to talk about in our community, but we also need to face reality in our community, that it is crime in our community. And we know there's crime in white communities as well. We have to come up with some solutions. This is midterm time. We vote for elected officials and we vote for the same people over and over again. And as long as we can continue to do that, we're going to get the same thing over and over again. Black folks vote Democratic Party more than any other party. This is reality. But how are we going to start to hold our elected officials accountable? We have to do more where it comes to policy. We have to do more when it comes to violence. There are more violence than gun violence. There is violence when you don't have opportunity to jobs, opportunity to affordable education, opportunity to even have a recreation center for our kids. And so I think there are just a lot of issues that we have to talk about when we're talking about violence and crime in our community. People are stressed. People are stressed. So almost at any time, we see road rage here in the metropolitan area, where people are getting out of cars, where they're so frustrated from life itself, from the rise of everything going up, from food, from gas, from childcare. Things are hard for our community. And as things get hard, people are stressed and they may take it out in what we may call, in a violent way. And so here in the state of Maryland, we're trying to have more healthcare providers to come to emergency scenes than we have police. We do know that in Black communities, we call police as well. And so there are issues that I think that we as community can take up. Our NAACP leaderships in our states, they're really getting involved in policies that can be changed statewide and local-wide, but also in school violence, going to the schools, making sure that these resource officers are not over policing our children in the school. And we're really pushing as leaders in our community that we do more in our community to make sure that, our children are not being over policed and not being locked up more than white kids for the same crime. So there's so much to talk about, but there so much that we as community leaders can also do ourselves.
Thank you so much, Leader Williams. Really appreciate that statement. Really interesting remarks to get started. Definitely a lot to dive into. I want to shift the conversation to really think about the present moment and where we're at. We have seen mass shootings happen in Texas and New York, and oftentimes a lot of the commentary is around that this is the result of mental health issues. What are our thoughts on that? How do we discuss this myth and really make sure that folks are understanding the real causes of mass shootings?
Well, I'll jump in briefly because I know these two distinguished women have so much more to say. When we were not as advanced and enlightened about sexual orientation, we used to go, oh, I bet because his daddy mistreated him, he turned gay. I bet because, he was reared in an environment where they let him play with dolls, he turned out to be gay. or she became lesbian because she was broken hearted over a relationship. I mean, reductive, narrow-minded, I think rather unenlightened viewpoints about a complicated, nuanced perspective that people's orientation may be biological, may be driven by the nature of who they are. It's not about deficit, it's about the surplus of value added to their particular orientation, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and the like. And so the same with mental health. Why are we being so reductive and narrow-minded when it comes to mental health? Oh, he must have, had a bad day and a poor, access to mental health is something we all have to be concerned about, right? Mental health is the same as people getting a checkup every year. You go to your doctor. Why not talk about anxiety? Why not speak about social disorders that keep people from going out, like agoraphobia? Why not speak about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder? Why not speak about dissociative or borderline behavior or borderline personality, or being diagnosed with schizophrenia or bipolar, right? And on and on and on. So to really besmirch the character of mental health, which should be a positive goal and a social good that we entertain on the one hand, as the reflex of a healthy society, gets reduced to killer with gun must have been crazy, right? Now, that's not to deny that there are not mental health issues involved, but we have to shift the paradigm of our thinking about mental health. And it's amazing. They don't never had no mental health problems when Negroes killing people.
Yeah.
I'll never see no resort to, oh my God, he must have been oppressed at home, and the ways in which the mental health, distresses to which he was subject, led him. No, we're pathological. We are nihilistic. We are people who are seen as likely to be, locked up because we're doing wrong and we're criminals inherently. Whereas when white folk do it, let's discover what his mother and father were doing. Let's figure out the relationship and so on. So we got to be honest and open about that. But the worship of guns, even if people have these kinds of distresses and illnesses, if you ain't got no access to guns, you can't do as much damage. This is why we are the leading, of all industrial nations, we are by far ahead of per capita, not only the ownership of weapons, and especially guns, but the harm that they do. That's why in British culture, so you'll hear about some incidences with guns, but also with knives. But you know what? An AR-15 will kill a lot more people than somebody with a knife. Because somebody with a knife, somebody gonna catch them or him or her at some point, and the carnage will be far less substantial. So I'm saying it is the obsession with gun culture, the belief that it is the gift of the birthright of an American citizen. How many young white boys are given guns as a rite of passage? And not just white boys, but so many people, the access to guns, the easy access to guns, the resolution of conflict, not by healthy psychological traits of discussion, dialogue, debate, resolution through conflict resolution, right? All that stuff is out the window when the gun is in the house, and the gun is in the school, and the gun is in the workplace, and the gun is in society. So I think that mental health is critical, is crucial. We should focus on it far more, but not to scapegoat mental health and mental distress as the unique cause of the problems that a lot of these white kids and others and our kids engage in, whether you're talking about urban cultures of violence, where the resolution is through the gun, the easy resort to an AR-15, or whether it is some white, loner, so-called, out here exercising his or her bigoted, practices by targeting communities of color or other minoritized populations.
Eric, I totally agree with you on that. And when it is a white kid or a white person committing these crimes, they have a mental health problem or, a family issue. And when it's our kids, when it's us, we're just thugs, we're prone to do that. And, that's how we operate. And I would say that it is a mental issue, even in our communities. And I'll say it starts with even young children. We know that we have a lot of crime throughout, especially inner cities. But my sister is a school teacher in Baltimore. And when you have children come to school that hear gunshots, or they come and they tell her they saw someone gotten shot on their block and they know them. I mean, and you talk about mental health issues, and we're talking about elementary school kids. And so this is real for us. That's the stress that we feel from being discriminated against in every system in this country. We are discriminated against, and don't be woman and Black. You know, talk about we all should have mental health issues. I mean, if you call exhaustion as being a Black female, we have some issues. The main issue is that we don't have enough mental health providers in our community. And that is something that we really need to talk about, that this conversation to start even in elementary school, that we should be talking about the issues that our children are facing and what they have to grow up with, and what they grow up with to think is normal. Even if they see a police officer, they are afraid, even if that police officer looked like them. And so this really starts at an early age for us. We know that, you know, when whites commit the same crime, and I think we have more whites committing these mass shootings, and let's really talk about these school shootings, than we have. But when it comes to policing our schools, we are more policed. Our children are more policed than white children are in their schools. And just seeing a police officer in your school constantly, 20 every day you go to school, that can cause you know, a mental distress itself, in my opinion. And so the conversation is, how do we get more mental health care providers in our community? How do we make this a real conversation, even when it comes to elementary school level for our children, because they are experiencing this. And then there is a high level of a Black suicide.
The only thing I would say, because my esteemed colleagues said the bulk of it, it's hard to follow that. What I would add is just like safety is our students and our young people having access to guidance counselors, right? Like safety is making sure that our young people feel supported. And I'm hearing a lot of what your son went through, and knowing just even last week, I had someone that I knew, a young Black man that was in crisis and was also talking about self-harm. And I knew who to talk to, but very easily he could have been priced out of support and help, and that is not accessible. And knowing that the challenges that our community experiences and face, just to have adequate mental health and to be supported from a mental health standpoint. I got my therapy appointment on Friday, thank goodness, right? Like we got to do what we got to do. But I think something that's important too, and is really harmful when there's these mass shootings and blaming it on mental health, is that there's this false equivalency that these people that commit these heinous acts in the name of just having mental health issues is the same as our young people, as myself, that's been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and depression. We are not the same. And there's a very like harmful narrative that is equating people that have trauma and are working through mental health challenges, such as myself. I don't go into a grocery store and shoot people. Right. And so I caution when we have this narrative, and usually it's one side or another that has this narrative of like, oh, it's a mental health issue. And exactly, our kids are never given the benefit of the doubt of having mental health challenges or anything like that. But it's a way to, I think, escape actual accountability that a lot of these structures and a lot of these systems in place that are reinforcing this behavior, it's rooted in white supremacy. It's rooted in this gun culture that we've talked about. And by saying, oh, it's a mental health issue, we are escaping that level of accountability and those root causes. And we are blaming it and having this false equivalency with people that actually may be struggling with the trauma of the world and do have mental health challenges. And just by labeling it a mental health issue, it now further stigmatizes, I think, people that want to seek help regarding any mental health challenges, OCD, bipolar, anxiety, anything like that. And if you're facing this false equivalency, I think that's very harmful and very dangerous. And it doesn't help people to actually want to seek help if we're already being all lumped together as, oh, you're crazy. The people in your community, even though you have anxiety because of the world, we're going to lump you in with mass shooters. That's a false equivalency, just as a means of escaping accountability and having the real conversations.
Agreed. I think what's absolutely necessary in this conversation is thinking about accountability, right? And thinking about how we're keeping our legislators and the folks who are creating policy accountable. You know, Professor Dyson talked about this earlier, but thinking about another way in which that folks escape accountability is the argument of what about Black on Black crime, right? And really addressing the idea that if we're going to talk about state violence and talking about the issues that are impacting our community, that's a consistent factor that's brought into the conversation. Well, if we're going to talk about this, we need to talk about Black on Black crime. So wondering if we can start to break down that down a little bit in terms of like what that actually means. How does community violence actually work, and why that is not an actual argument that we can use when we're talking about state violence?
Well, I'll be brief because I know Sister Lang has so much more to say, and Sister Williams. Look, the community ain't got no badge and a gun. The interaction between most people of color and minoritized peoples with the state is through law enforcement, right? Not their state legislators, not their state representatives, not their local council people, not the dog catcher, not the comptroller. It's the police. And the police work for us. You would never know that. You could never tell that they are sworn to uphold and protect the laws of the land by treating us with respect, because our tax dollars are paying their salaries. So the truth is that Jamal and Tanisha and the people out here that you think are doing harm who are Black ain't swore to uphold the law. So they don't have the same protections either, right? Because if we catch one of those Black people or minoritized populations out here doing dirt, more than likely they're going to jail. Just today, you know, Eric Holder, not the Attorney General, but the young man who is now convicted of killing Nipsey Hussle, will likely serve the rest of his life in prison. When Black people who commit crimes are caught and subject to the penalty of the land, it is usually harshly applied. Police people routinely get off. So the difference between community violence and the police is a matter of the state, and the state leveraging its violence. When Jalen Walker is shot at 90 times and hit 60 times, that's not the Rolling 60s. That's not the Crenshaw Mafia. That's not, you know, the Sconeones back in my day, or the Earl Flans, or the Bloods, or the Crips. That is law enforcement in the name of the state, paid for by the dues-paying citizens of the land. Like Tupac said, just the other day, I got lynched by some crooked cops. And to this day, them same cops on the beat getting major pay. But when I get my check, they taking tax out, so we paying the cops to knock the Blacks out. It's real simple, subsidizing your own oppression. So, and then I'll end by saying, so not only does the state have the imprimatur of a legal authority, then they got the Supreme Court backing them up, and they got local courts backing them up. It's hard to charge a cop with killing somebody or doing damage and wrong. They got to do extreme stuff. And even then, we don't get the kind of simple justice to which we are air in which we should be routinely given. So that, and then on the other hand, in terms of community violence, what resources are we providing? We know you ain't got to be no genius. If you ain't got good education and your schools are jacked up and the job market is horrible, people will commit carnage regardless of their race. When their backs are against the wall, sometimes the only way out is through your behind. They're going to shoot out, stab out. They're going to wig out. They're going to, do harmful things to self and to neighbor because of that horrible situation of trauma that they routinely endure. So we need community resources to address the community violence that is the manifestation of a lack of resource that forces people, that encourages people to behave in certain predictable fashions.
I think building off of that, one thing that really makes my teeth itch about this narrative about Black on Black crime, Black on Black crime does not give the authority for the state to murder us. What does that, how does that justify state sanctioned violence? What we got going on in our community, why does the state have to murder us? What about that means this is the go ahead for the state to murder us? Like point blank, I really don't understand that. And that's one of the most frustrating things. And, I heard someone say this years ago, and it really stuck with me. And I think it's true. And we see it every day, is that white folks get protect and serve and everyone else gets law and order. I don't know the last time people actually felt, at least in my community here in Milwaukee, that the police officers are protecting them and serving them. There are so many times people will actually call the police and they'll respond real snarky and say, "Oh, I thought you were trying to defund us. Oh, we'll get there when we get there." They make these smart comments now. And so I don't know in what world people do their job and still get more money. They do their job and they get more of the city budget. In Milwaukee, for example, and we're going to start our city budget process very, very soon in the next month or so. But in the city of Milwaukee, roughly 47% of the city budget goes to the police department. And for context, our health department gets roughly 3%. And in the health department is our Office of Violence Prevention. So our Office of Violence Prevention isn't even getting the full 3%. They're getting a portion of that 3% that the health department gets, while the city of Milwaukee is the majority or the bulk of the budget, 46% of the budget, goes to law enforcement, where they have stated that they will not do their jobs. They intentionally will not come and they will not go to certain areas, or they over police certain areas. And we've had data in open records requests that show that. And so I always say that I'm of the belief that I don't think people wake up one day and say, "I'm going to be Scarface because I saw the movie and I think it's cool." People are pushed to their limits through years, generations, and systemic disinvestments in our community. When our education system has been defunded, no one bat an eye. But people say defund the police and people get scared. But we've been systemically defunding our services in our communities for years. And then it's a powder keg. We're shaking up our communities. We're putting our communities in desperate situations and then wonder why people are responding the way that they are in order to survive. You can drive down certain streets. You can drive from one side of a bridge to another side of a bridge, and you see the dividing line. You see the lack of investments into one community over another. There are times I'll drive, just outside of the city limits, and I can tell you immediately the instant I am back in the city of Milwaukee, given the investments and the lack of investment on the roads instantly are bumpier. There's trash everywhere. We see how, especially how segregation has impacted Milwaukee. It's very easy to say, "Oh, the north side is Black folks. That's where we're not going to invest. That's where we're not going to go." And then we have all of these opinions of what should be happening and the solutions. And so I think for people to say, "Oh, it's Black on Black crime," and somehow that gives the state the authority to murder us, us is incredibly reductive and to me backwards, but I think it eliminates the years of the disinvestment and actually how we got here and why people are led to do the things that they do. And I'm again of the belief no one's glamorizing this. No one wants to be in these positions, but when you have generations of disinvestment, sometimes people have to do what they have to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Angela. And, you know, I'm native Washingtonian, and looking at all the gentrification happening there in DC, and so many years we talked about the streets and, you know, how they need to be repaired and, you know, and not investing in our communities. And now you see those same communities that we grew up in. The streets look great. They're always doing construction in DC. They have new schools and, you know, all beautiful, you know, even on H Street, you know, Northeast DC, you know, where I grew up not far from. And you know, I would just say this, here in the state of Maryland, the NAACP and many of our leader organizations, we have really been pushing policies where we can look at these state police officers, where their records can now be open. And so we really pushed that last year. We didn't get everything we wanted to get, but we are determined to hold our police officers accountable for these you know, useless killings here in the state of Maryland. I would say this, that, you know, we know that even when it comes to Black police officers, when they talk about Black on Black crime, now I have a lot of friends that are police officers. And they will tell me if they see a Black Lives Matter protest, the first thing they say, you all killing yourselves. These are Black police officers saying this to me. That does not give you, as Angela said, the right to murder us, you know. So we have to hold them accountable, even if we have to come after our elected officials to do more. We have a prosecutor here in the state of Maryland, I'll just say the state of Maryland, that will hold police officers accountable. But it's the police officers that every time it's for her to get reelected, they are running campaigns against her because she's determined she's going to protect her community. So we need more prosecutors that will listen to community and that don't mind taking the risk of prosecuting police officers as well. And then also as community leaders and being an NAACP, even just being a community resident, a lot of times I would take it upon myself. If I see a police officer stop a group of teenagers or a group of people, I will park my car and I will let those officers know I am watching you, even if it means for me to get out of my car and walk towards them to let them know I am watching you. I am policing the police. And so even if it's something as small as this, I did it last year. I lived in Bowie, Maryland. And Bowie, Maryland, we have our own police department there. And they definitely are, you know, most of them are retired police officers that come to these cities and, you know, they do their retirement and another police station. And they had a carload of 3 teenagers. And I got out of my car. I watched them sit those teenagers on the curve and they sat there. And then they put the cuffs on them, the wraps on their hand. And they stood up and they sat and they stood up. And I walked up to them. I said, are you going to arrest them? Or are you going to let them go? Because right now it looks like harassment. What are you doing? Why are they being stopped? We here in the Prince George's County, we got rid of our police captain because of the discrimination that was going on even in his station. So I just say that we can do more on the state and local level to hold, politics are all local. And we can do more on the state and local level, especially when we have leaders in our community. And I'll say this for all of the NAACP leaders that are watching. We're not just elected in our positions or appointed in our positions just to sit there and have the banner of the NAACP on us. We're there to be a voice for our community, to be watchdogs, I'll say that, for our community, and make sure that we are treated fairly in our communities. And so, it does not, this black on black crime thing, as again, Professor Dyson said, you're going to do crime where you live. And if you have no other resources, no other way to feed your child or your family, and then you can't even sell marijuana or cannabis legally, because now they legalized that and took that money from us, then you might do go commit a crime, especially the way the economy is today. And so, this is a conversation we should have more and more, not just on a national level, wisdom, but this needs to be statewide conversation. What do we do? How do we change the narrative? How do we create our own narrative? And how do we hold those that are supposed to be accountable to us? Like Professor Dyson said, I pay your salary. And when I see the police officers, I let them know I pay your salary. And I am going to stand here and I'm going to watch this activity, even if I have to pull out my camera and watch and see. That, we can do that. We can do more. We can pass policies, but we can also be present. Be present. The other thing I would say is that we can't ignore that there are many of our community that do see that we have black on black crime because of the community that they live in. And so how do we have those conversations? Those living room conversations. How do we have those kitchen conversations with people that work 2 and 3 jobs trying to make it? And they live in communities that's underserved in those communities, and their children cannot come outside and safely play. We have those communities here in the DMV that they can't come and safely play. And they're not so afraid of a white guy is going to walk down the street and shoot up their kids. They are afraid that their kids may get shot in a crossfire. How do we have those conversations? And how do we prevent that? When I do see, and many of us, when we do see petty theft or petty crimes, or kids may be misbehaving, we do say something and say, look, this is what they want you all to do. They actually have a bed for you already. When you were born, they counted the beds, in the prison system for you. And so we do have to be real about this. If there is crime, there's crime everywhere, but there is crime in the Black community. So how do we address that with real conversations with our seniors that are afraid, with our children, and with our parents and our leaders? So this is a conversation that we really have openly here in the state of Maryland Wisdom. We are talking to our elected officials, and we're trying to find more and more policies that we can pass, that we can hold our police officers accountable. And Angela, I'll say this, the smartness that comes out of their mouths. That they are taking their time to answer a 911 call. And this call could be an emergency, that someone is in a crisis or, having some real medical issues. They will take their time when it comes to our community. And so we want those that are hired to serve. We want them to serve us, and we have to remind them that your job is to serve us, and we do pay your salary. And so let's be bold enough and use our voice and our power to make sure that we're doing that.
Thank you so much, Robin. Totally agree with you. I know even back when I used to live in California, I was a part of a cop watch program where we were making sure that we were keeping police accountable. And everything we do with the NAACP is about accountability and making sure that we're pushing policy to keep our community safe. And especially when we're talking about community violence, we want to make sure that we understand that our fight is to ensure that we are eliminating racial and economic biases, right? A lot of the work that we do as organizers, as leaders in this organization, is making sure that community violence is being addressed at all levels, and even thinking at the level of ending mass incarceration and the impacts that community violence has incarcerating our people. We are coming to the close of our conversation, but would love to offer about 2 minutes per speaker just to leave some final remarks, particularly thinking about what are the solutions to prevention of community violence. And I will start with Angela.
First of all, thanks for having me. And I feel like we could have went on for hours and hours and hours. And I'm very, very grateful to have learned and heard from my esteemed colleagues as well. I think the first thing I would say is it's weird to say as a almost 33-year-old that I've been organizing for 15 years. It's weird to say that. But in my 15 years of organizing, I don't think we've had serious mainstream conversations about safety the way that we are now. And while progress and change is very, very slow, and the urgency is only getting bigger and bigger, I am encouraged that we're stretching our limits about safety. We're stretching our limits about policing and what that means. And something that we always kind of go back to here in Wisconsin is that we know what keeps our community safe. Safe is having quality education. It's having access to mental health. It's having access to a livable wage job. It's investing into communities that are thriving, because when communities are thriving, then they're safer. And I want to challenge us and to push us to dream of a world that we've never seen before. And that is uncomfortable and that is challenging. But the only way out of this dark time is to think outside the box, not just tinker with what's already been done, but to completely start over and really challenge ourselves to dream and to reimagine safety, even in ways that we've never even thought of or ever experienced. But we shouldn't take those things off the table, because everyone deserves the freedom to thrive and to feel safe in their communities.
Thank you so much, Angela. Professor Dyson.
Well, I mean, obviously everything Ms. Lang said, Ms. Williams said is extremely important. And I would just add the systemic disinvestment in post-industrial urban communities has devastated those communities, has wreaked havoc upon them, manifest in systemic undereducation, in defunding of public education, of the refusal to direct resources in the public sphere toward the relief of the burden imposed upon minoritized communities, especially Black communities, as a result of their race and their economic position in their class. So a couple things. First of all, the great preacher Howard Thurman said, refuse the temptation to scale down your dreams to the event you're confronting. The event you're confronting will not exhaust the infinite capacity of the Black imagination to resolve these issues. And then secondly, get our Black religious institutions involved. I mean, instead of judging somebody about how short their skirt is or how much makeup they got on, or if the Holy Ghost is in them because they're speaking in tongues, speaking the dadgum tongue we do understand. Speak in terms of economic justice. Speak about leveraging, and mobilizing the Black vote. Speak about the way in which Black communities have been victimized by, manifest forms of social injustice, and address them. Don't just have, some great gospel music and some great preaching. We need all that. Let's have some social justice, theology that is applied to the most vulnerable people in our communities, and then give them a shot to get past the violence that we confront.
Love that. Love that. Leader Williams.
Well, I'll just say I really enjoyed this conversation tonight with the experts. Thank you for having me. And thank you all for joining the NAACP in this great conversation tonight. I would say that we have to continue to do the work. We have to do it at the federal level, but we have to remember that change really comes when we're talking about state and local level policies, holding each other accountable, holding our elected officials accountable, and holding those that are working for us accountable. So I'll just say we have to keep this conversation going. We keep this work going. We have to organize. And then talking to each other, starting from our babies, right? We just really have to talk and do this work. We have so much that we have to do with so little resources to do it with. So, but I know working together, with academics and with community organizers like Angela and all the leaders that we have, we can do this. We can change the criminal justice system in this country. We just really have to do it. We have to stay focused, and we can do this. And so I'll just say I'm looking forward to what's next in this work, especially as we really push this in the NAACP as part of our agenda moving forward.
Thank you so much, Robin. And thank you to all the panelists who participated in this exciting conversation. I hope everybody was able to take away something important, real solutions, tangible understandings of how we break down this conversation. Definitely more to come, but thank you again for tuning in, and I will close there.